This cool looking bug is a mayfly. They are found in nearly all freshwater streams and rivers, including some stillwater ponds and lakes. Mayflies hatch in the greatest numbers throughout the spring, summer, and fall. The best dry fly fishing with mayflies will be in the afternoon and into the evenings, except for a few mayfly species such as the Trico. Let's talk about mayfly nymphs. Nymphs are burrowed into the stream bed floor or crawling along the rocks year-round. Fly fishing mayfly nymphs with a tight line technique or using a strike indicator will always be a productive way to catch trout. Try using a classic nymph pattern such as a pheasant tail nymph or a hare's ear nymph. When water temperatures are just right, mayflies make their way up to the surface by either swimming or drifting in the current. Fun fact, they actually expel oxygen bubbles between their skin and the nymphal shuck to help float themselves to the surface, kind of like a buoy. And these mayflies are what we call emergers, the ones that are emerging and hatching into the next stage of their life cycle. Swinging soft hackles or drifting a mayfly emerger pattern is a great way to target trout during these early hours of a hatch. Once the mayfly reaches the surface, their nymphal shuck will split open and will allow them to crawl out onto the surface of the water using like water tension. These mayflies are what we call duns. Basically, they're done. They look like tiny little sailboats scattered across the surface. Mayfly duns drift downstream until their wings dry enough to take flight. Cold, wet, and damp weather usually causes the mayflies to drift a little longer before their wings are ready, which is why you'll sometimes find better hatches and better fishing on crappy days. A parachute-style mayfly or comparadun fly pattern are great dun imitations just because of how they sit on the water, and they also can imitate emerging mayflies or ones that are sort of crippled coming out of their nymphal shuck. Mayflies fly off into the streamside brush and trees to molt and then mate. Mayfly females will return to the water ready to deposit their eggs, and males will fall into the water out of exhaustion. We call these adult mayflies spinners, and this combination of males and females descending to the water in a big swarm, usually starting in the late afternoon and then going into the evenings, is what we call a spinner fall. This usually happens in the late afternoon. Use a classic dry fly pattern like a parachute style or a split wing spinner style, and use that on like a long 9 to 12 foot 5x or 6x fly leader. On Tricos, which usually descend in the early mornings and before noon, those you'll probably want like a 7x just because of how small the flies are, and you do want a better presentation, and that longer leader coupled with the thinner tippet usually gives you a much better drift.